Sean Payton has a vision for the new free agents that the Denver Broncos have signed. How will Brandon Jones and Malcolm Roach play into the mix for Denver this season? We'll break it all down and much more in today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos Country? Welcome into a brand new episode, Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to everybody in Broncos Country, including all the everydayers out there who make us your first listen of the day every single day. Just a reminder, you can get Locked on Broncos for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, so make sure you subscribe or follow so you never miss out on what's going on with your favorite team every single day, all year long, as we go through the offseason, because, folks, for the true fan, there's never an offseason. We look forward to bringing you all the Broncos news, content, coverage, and more here on Locked on Broncos. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports. Joined alongside, as always, by Sayre Bedinger, site expert, predominantlyorange.com. Vision, vision, vision. It's always one of the words, the buzzwords that we hear from Sean Payton, whether it's signing free agents, whether it's talking about the guys that the Broncos had just drafted. He has a vision for a lot of these players, and obviously Denver's one of the first big moves after releasing Justin Simmons in free agency for them was going out and getting a safety in Brandon Jones, who played for the Miami Dolphins formerly under former Broncos head coach Vic Fangio this past season. The question I think a lot of people had there is, what type of role is he going to play? Now, I think a lot of people can acknowledge his strength is to be able to play inside the box, to be able to be a run defender there. And I think there's been a little bit of a knock on, well, he's not really going to be that middle post safety. According to Broncos head coach Sean Payton, the safety position this year for Denver, especially under new DBs coach Jim Leonhard, they're going to have to know left and right, which means that they're going to have to be able to play that middle post and play in the box.
And they're going to have to be able to play a versatile role in terms of rushing the passer and playing in coverage, it sounds like, because I think the Broncos really like Brandon Jones, specifically his ability to blitz and get after the quarterback, Cody, which he did very well. In fact, this was something that George Payton had highlighted in his discussions with the media. One of the many times that he met with different outlets there, he said that Brandon Jones, he was playing at an elite level in 2022 prior to injury. Now, if you look at the numbers, 49 total tackles in 7 games there for Brandon Jones that season, 3 passes defensed, 2 sacks, 2 quarterback hits. And he was sent on a blitz quite often, Cody, 21 blitzes in those 7 games after blitzing 69 times the year prior to that.
Nice.
And so very nice indeed. So I think George Payton and this Broncos front office and coaching staff, they may be on to something here. Of course, Jones had a solid year this past year as well, but they're pointing to that 2022 season where I believe Brian Flores was still there in Miami. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. I could be mistaken, but either way, he's played for Flores at one point or another there in Miami. And we know how much Flores likes to blitz, how much he likes to attack the line of scrimmage. We discussed that a lot in the lead up to the Broncos matchup with the Minnesota Vikings this past season. So I find it very interesting that this was highlighted in the overall skill set that he has, because we haven't seen a ton of the safeties coming up and attacking as blitzers against the pass. Typically been that too high look. So I'll be intrigued to see what he can do in this particular regard.
Well, and there's also been a lot of conversations at the NFL annual league meeting. I think it was Buffalo Bills head coach Sean McDermott who said something along the lines like, regarding the too high safety look, he says, is it in style anymore? Like, you're starting to see, like, that used to be like the counter. And really, Vic Fangio kind of created the blueprint of making it, hey, in order to take away the deep ball passing effect, because teams like the Kansas City Chiefs and Tyreek Hill, they were lighting up people in the deep ball. So how do you mitigate that? Well, you have 2 safeties, and then you play cover 4 primarily, so you can have extra help deep. And you have obviously quarter. Now you see a lot of quarter half coverage around the NFL. But are we going to see a change here where you may see a too high shell, but it's never going to stay the too high shell primarily? Are we going to start seeing a little bit more of that old school traditional cover 3 coverages that we've seen? Cover 3's made a little bit of a big jump back in the NFL. But I also want to go back to what we saw from the Broncos under Vance Joseph last year. And that was PJ Locke blitzing quite a bit, right? There was a stretch where he became the only Broncos safety in history to have a sack in 3 consecutive games. And he does it so well. So, PJ can do that already. Now, you're getting a guy in Brandon Jones who's done that really, really well and is also a great run defender on the alley there. So now it's like, okay, what does Denver have planned in terms of how they have their secondary looks? Part of me really feels like under Jim Leonard, even in Vance Joseph's defense, I really hope we see a lot more press man. I hope we see a lot more ultra aggressiveness because Jones played in a very aggressive defensive system. He thrives on it. PJ can do the same exact thing. And if the Broncos can maybe show up and get a real solidified cover corner opposite of Patrick Surtain, someone that can play man to man and lock up, or whether that's Damari Mathis or Riley Moss, Denver's going to have opportunities to get after the quarterback even more this season, which, Sayre, they need to. They got to stop. Like, it was my biggest pet peeve. And look, I understand as a coach, you have to sometimes. I was peeved watching Patrick Surtain have to play off ball so much. You need to be able to play press man to man at the NFL level. Hopefully, they're able to get back to that. And the additions of Jones and how he may be used could help the Broncos create more takeaways.
You want to see exactly that as well, right? And I just think as you're discussing that, I think about how the Broncos have three guys, like you mentioned, PJ Locke setting the team record with, consecutive games with a sack, and Caden Stearns. Remember, that was kind of a big selling point for him in his first two NFL seasons, getting after Lamar Jackson and making some plays as a pass rusher as well. So there's so many different ways that the Broncos can use these guys. And you kind of hope now, if the too high safety look was the thing and is kind of becoming a thing of the past, maybe having these three safeties on the field at the same time in some capacity is a way that the Broncos can utilize their best and most athletic personnel. Because that, and I do stand corrected here, Cody. Brian Flores, he was only the coach in Miami for the first 2 years of Brandon Jones's career there, but still he sent him on a lot of blitzes. And this is something that I think was identified very early on in his NFL and professional career, is the ability to get after the quarterback. Had 5 sacks in 2021 when Flores was still there. So I think that there's definitely some merit to this idea here that these guys can all be interchangeable. And that's something that I think we heard from both Sean Payton and George Payton, is that it's about playing left and right. It's about bringing flexibility, being, excited about these guys as blitzers. I like the group the Broncos have here and the versatility that they provide.
When you look at the safety market, I mean, I think there are certain guys that have certain specialties in terms of what they're able to do, but the game may be transitioning back to like, hey, like you can't just play this singular role. Like you need to be able to play a multitude of roles defensively. I think when you look at the embodiment of where Jamar Cain and his background as a coach comes on the defensive line, he wants his guys to be able to play not just DN, not just to be able to play the 5 tech or the 4-eye, but to be able to play the 3, to be able to play the 1 tech as well. Like, you need to be able to be interchangeable there to maximize your personnel opportunities. For me, I get the vibe, especially with Jim Leonard, I think who's done a terrific job at the collegiate level of this, being able to maximize the overall skill set of the players that you have to give you the best chance to generate takeaways, to be a very good defense, which, look, Denver, the strength of their team has been the defense for quite some time. Can Denver's defense be even better? Last year, they simply weren't good enough, especially in the key moments Denver needed them to be in that down stretch against the Detroit Lions, the Houston Texans. We'll see if Brandon Jones can be a difference maker here for the Broncos defense in 2024. But there is going to be a guy we're also going to talk about, Malcolm in the middle. What is the plan? What is the vision for the Broncos' newest addition at the defensive tackle position? Is he going to be an every down defensive lineman, or is he going to play seldom snaps? We'll take a look at that and much more here on today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel Sportsbook. And as you all know, at America's #1 sportsbook, the month of March was certainly one that contained a lot of madness, especially at the college hoops level. Say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. And whether you're betting on a big upset or you're betting on a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers, they get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Once again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon, and bet on college hoops until they cut the nets down.
The Denver Broncos will be relying on Malcolm Roach to play a big role on their defensive line in 2024, but just how big? Well, Sean Payton kind of let us in on what he envisions for Big Papa Roach here in the middle of that Denver Broncos defensive line this coming season. And we're going to talk about that on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, but want to say thank you to every single one of you that makes Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, free and available everywhere that you listen to podcasts. And you can watch the show on YouTube. So if you're subscribed on YouTube as well, Cody and I appreciate you so much this offseason for tuning in every day. And are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? You got to turn down the volume with all the shouting and the arguing, things like that. Well, make the switch today to Locked On Sports. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring the biggest stories without all the screaming and arguing. Locked On Sports today, it's going to bring you can't miss analysis, opinions, news, everything that you want and need, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Cody, let's talk about Malcolm Roach in the middle. Malcolm in the middle, Papa Roach. I mean, look at this guy's got plenty of nickname opportunities, but what can we expect for him on the Denver Broncos defensive line this year? This was a crucial addition at maybe the weakest area of this team defensively.
Well, and you're getting a guy who's, I think, athletic enough, has got some power to him that can, do something, I think, inside the A gap, which, look, I think that's got to be a bigger area of emphasis for Denver this year. For me personally, I think that Denver last year, especially in games where they were just getting gashed up the middle inside the A and the B gaps, right, for a 4 or 5 yard gain, then that would force them to tighten up. But then they'd give up a big run on the outside. Like Denver's run defense was so porous last year. And the question is, like, what does it take to fix it? Is it a personnel issue or is it a scheme issue? I think it could be a little bit of both. And you also have a guy who can maybe just stand firm in there. Like, and I think Denver's biggest issue that we saw, they didn't have a guy at the defensive tackle position that would command necessarily consistent double teams, which would free up guys like Jonathan Cooper, Baron Browning, Nick Bonito, guys on the outside for one-on-one opportunities against tackles. Therefore, it made it easier. And then we also saw it trickle down to the linebacker play. Like, defensive tackles getting washed down. That allows the guard to work up to the play side linebacker to get hands on. It creates a free running lane for an elusive back. And Denver played some really talented backs last year. I think the addition of Malcolm Roach is a step in the right direction, right? And I think you and I have kind of debated here on the show, is it enough? I think we still need to add to the position in terms of where Denver's at. But with Roach, he's not going to be an every down defensive lineman here in Vance Joseph's defense, which means that he's going to be playing certain snap situations, certain personnel packages, which is a good move. But it also begs the question, when he's off the field, who's coming onto the field for him? That's where I have my questions.
That's where we both agree the Broncos need to continue to add players to this defensive line to make sure that these guys can stay fresh, to make sure that you can bring pass rush in waves. But I did find it interesting. Sean Payton, the Denver Broncos head coach, he highlighted the fact that Malcolm Roach has been largely available over the last 4 years, meaning he's been able to stay healthy. And he envisions him as a 30 to 40 snap per game type of player, Cody, which would be a huge deviation from what we had seen, at least this past year, where he played 290 total snaps. So for those that don't care to do all that math in your head there, that's roughly, 15 snaps a game, something like that. So I think now you're talking 30 to 40 snaps a game. That would put him in the 500, 550, 600 snap range this season, depending on what so the role is going to increase for him. He's not going to be playing a 30 to 35%. He's going to be playing more than that for the Broncos, probably closer to 50 to 55%, which again is still part-time, but that just kind of enhances the fact that you do need to have depth in this rotation. You need to have guys that can come onto the field in any situation, come onto the field for a drive. But I'm encouraged by this signing, Cody. The more you dissect it, you love the versatility. You love the fact that Broncos took a shot on a young guy who worked really hard to get from undrafted free agent to, signing a contract outside of New Orleans. I like this move. I think Malcolm Roach, he's going to be, it allows the Broncos to do whatever they want with DJ Jones in terms of playing him at different positions. I think there's just the top three, at least, it gives you confidence that those guys are going to be able to produce at a high level for the Broncos in 2024.
And that's what Peyton said in terms of like the ability for Roach. Like he'll play the nose tackle, right? Where you're going to see him sometimes in a zero tech, which is head up directly on the center, like in the crown of his helmet, or a one tech, which is on one of the outside shoulders of that center. He could play the 2-eye, which is the inside shoulder of the offensive guard. And then he can play the 3 tech, which is the outside shoulder of the guard, closer to the offensive tackle. And it's about being able to control the A and the B gaps here. And Denver, I don't think has done that consistently enough. And I think with him, he's a younger guy, right? And what he's going to bring to the table that Mike Purcell didn't, he doesn't have an overall large volume of it, but I think that there's going to be more chances for him to pressure the quarterback, especially if he wins some one-on-one matchups on the interior there. That gives Denver a boost that they need. Now, behind him, though, is this where maybe a Rashard Lawrence can come into the mix rotation-wise? Or, like, as we talked about on some previous episodes of the show, and we did our mock draft earlier this week, and the Broncos ended up getting Mason Smith out of LSU. Like, for Jamar Cain, is he going to have new faces to work with as well as the new defensive line coach, and maybe even bringing in some familiar faces he's been used to in this year's NFL draft? Denver needs, I think, at this position, specifically nose tackle, you need guys that can play there in waves. Now, here's also another thing you can do. You mentioned DJ Jones. DJ, I think, is the one player here. Zach Allen, I think, could do it as well. But you could get hybrid with these guys a little bit. DJ can play as a nose tackle too. But the question is, like, all right, if you're going to bump DJ down to nose tackle, well, he's going to be playing that one tech. And that means that a guy like Roach is going to be playing that three tech. So you can mix and match these guys in certain spots. And if that gives your defense the advantage, then I'm for it. I think a lot of it as well is like who's going to play linebacker next to Alex Singleton. Like, these are going to be huge keys, I think, to see how the Broncos stop the run this upcoming season. And yes, there is a lot of pressure on them to do just that. But look, there's also some pressure on some other guys that have been battling some injuries throughout their career so far as a Denver Bronco. Sean Payton shared his thoughts on Greg Dulcich, where he's at right now in his process of recovery, plus Caden Stearns at the safety position. We're going to break that down and much more here on today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos. As we jump into the fourth quarter action on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, pressure is mounting a little bit for tight end Greg Dulcich after he's had 2 seasons worth of injuries to his hamstring, and also Caden Stearns, who's coming off of a season-ending injury as well. The Broncos hope to put them in a position to succeed so far this upcoming season, and the hope is that they can stay healthy. Thank you so much, Broncos Country, for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day every single day. Just a reminder, you can get Locked On Broncos for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Sayre, the conversation I think that everyone in Broncos country is having as it pertains to injuries, guys that have been banged up, and we always have to preface this by saying these guys don't choose to be injured. And often at times you see the fan base sour on players because of injuries. And I think when you look at players like Greg Dulcich, I think you look at players like Caden Stearns, as you and I both know it, very, very talented players. They have dealt with injuries, and that has been unfortunate. But you can't deny that when they're healthy, they are difference makers for Denver's offense and Denver's defense.
Yeah, these are impact players that really the Broncos have missed out in the last couple of years, not having these guys available and on the field. I mean, offensively, Greg Dulcich is kind of that missing piece. And Nathaniel Hackett didn't get a lot of stuff right, but he was right when we saw that behind the Broncos clip of him in the draft room saying this guy brings something to the offense that we don't have. And that was true. We saw that when he first got onto the field as a rookie, just immediately torching the Los Angeles Chargers defense in the first half of that game on a Monday Night Football. And just you see that from Dulcich, the ability after the catch that he has, the way that he's able to stretch the field, the threat that he poses to the defense that nobody else really does at the tight end position for the Broncos, especially consistently. I mean, that's something that's been missing. And I love what Sean Payton said. You know, he's really right now, he's like, I'm not going to call it I wouldn't call it a make or break year, but he said that Dulcich is eager to put these injury issues in the rear view. And that's the kind of mentality that we need to see from Dulcich this year. We know we heard earlier in the offseason that Peyton and the Broncos, they're really working to find ways to help Dulcich manage, like, okay, these hamstring issues keep coming up. And it's an issue of like, hey, you're a big guy who moves really fast. We need to figure out what's the best way for you to move fast without hurting this part of your body. They're doing the research. They're sending him to the specialists. They're making sure that they have plans in place because the Broncos, they were what? I think Sean Payton said the second best team this past year in terms of total missed games injury-wise. So they believe that they have a formula to help a player like this succeed. The question is, can it happen? Because it's been 2 straight years now of hamstring issues for Dulcich coming out of UCLA.
Well, and the thing for him, too, it's been 4 hamstring injuries to the same hamstring. And look, like I said last year, I watched him go through his recovery. He got injured in week 1 against the Raiders. I watched him go through all the necessary prep work with Bo Lowry on the side field. They never rushed him back. Like, that's the thing. I feel like there was a misconception, like, oh, the Broncos rushed him back. They never rushed him back. He followed the protocol, right? There was like a 2 or 3 week stretch where we didn't see anything from him except stretching. Stretching. We didn't see any like static work. We just saw him stretching, working out the hamstrings, not doing much. Then you saw some light footwork, some ladder drills. Then you saw it progress from ladder drills eventually to some light jogging. And then after the light jogging, after a week or two period, you saw the buildup for some sprints. And then it led to him being able to come back on that Thursday night game against the Kansas City Chiefs. And to be honest with you, in practice, I mean, he looked fine, but it was just one simple route. And you got to factor in also the weather there in Kansas City for that game specifically was very, very cold. It just was not a good formula. And then you had the other setback, and right. And then it set him back even longer. That was ultimately very, very disappointing. And obviously no one was more disappointed than Greg. Then he tried to come back toward the end of the season. Then he had something pop up where his foot began just to like fill up with swelling. And that's just something Denver was out of it at that point. So there's no point of putting him on the field when maybe like, okay, hey, like this year's already a wash. It's already done with. It's not worth putting him out there and getting even more hurt. And we're just going to rest him. Like that was what the Broncos did in those final couple of games, or maybe he could have been ready to play. And I think he would have played if Denver was playing for something at that point, but that simply was not an option for them at that discretion. So now he's got this entire offseason. I'm very curious to see, and we'll probably find out once we get to training camp. Did he lose weight? Did he put on weight? Right? Where was the issue? Like we didn't hear that. Like we just heard Sean Payton say like it could be a weight issue. We're like, well, does it mean that he doesn't have enough weight, or does it mean that he needs to lose weight? If he loses weight, then I think often that maintains probably his speed. If he puts on weight, does it maybe take away his speed but create durability in the long term? That's the question that I don't have the answer to right now, but it's something worth monitoring. But Denver can't go into this season thinking that Dulcich is going to be healthy because of the body of work, that he hasn't been able to stay healthy. You have to have at least an insurance policy behind him in the event that it does happen, because if you bank on it and then it happens and you're like, well, we have no one to be mad at but ourselves because we didn't prepare for this being a possibility. And I feel like that's where Denver maybe dropped the ball a little bit this past season. And I think you go now to Caden Stearns as well. Like a lot of changes inside the safety room. We know PJ Locke re-signed. They signed Brandon Jones. Caden is a guy that has proven he can be a valuable starter in the National Football League. He can be a ball hawk. He can be a guy who takes things away. He suffered that freak injury last year, Sayre, on the first play, first snap that he had gotten there, where he went to go make a tackle. His knee hit the ground and it ruptured his patella tendon. Like just bad luck. And I think one thing that Sean said is that they're not going to rush these guys and that they're going to wait till they're 100%. They're going to see where they're at and they're going to see what they're able to do. I think that's the smart move. But I think if Caden Stearns is fully healthy, he's going to add more versatility to the Broncos secondary, which is absolutely needed. And I think that Jim Leonhard can maximize that unit's entire skill set to give the Broncos defense the best chance to succeed.
It gives them plenty of weapons, plenty of options on the back end. And like you mentioned with Sean Payton, he talked about the fact that it's not only a matter of seeing when these guys are going to be 100% healthy, it's then when are they going to be ready to perform on top of that. So there's two different timelines you're working with here. Of course, we saw last year the rapid, return for Javonte Williams. So who knows? I mean, every injury is different. Every body type is different. Everybody's recovery process is different, but you'd love to see Caden Stearns be able to compete fully this offseason, as well as Greg Dulcich. We want to see those guys on the field as much as possible. But for Stearns, it's really, like you said, it's been a matter of freak injuries here and there. This kind of stuff, unfortunately, was part of the reason why he may have underachieved a bit at Texas, despite being a 5-star recruit. So you just hope that these things can stop following these guys. Like they got to, hopefully they can shake the injury bug or get a stretch of good luck, because especially in Caden's situation, he's playing for a new contract after this season.
Yeah.
He's going to be a free agent already after 2024, which is just wild to think about. I mean, how quickly time has flown there, but you would love to see him be able to get another contract in Denver, some way, some shape, some form, because I think, Cody, this may be a hot take. He may have the best ball skills on the team now with Justin Simmons out of the mix. I know Patrick Surtain, he could pick off passes with the best of them. Riley Moss, that was his thing at Iowa. There's a lot of guys with good ball skills out there, but man, Caden Stearns, it feels like every time he was on the field, he was like a ball magnet. So he's got ball skills, he's got instincts, he's got range, he can do all of these things. But just with both of these guys, like you said with Dulcich, you just can't plan on their their availability being consistent this year, which is a bummer, but it also gives you the opportunity to plan for those contingencies where maybe the Broncos really haven't these last couple years.
And my hope is that Bo Lowry can find ways to, like, these guys, this is what they need in season, like maintenance, like they're staying healthy. This is what we need to do for these guys to avoid unnecessary wear and tear because of their injury history and things like that. I know that Caden is preparing for the opportunity. I know he's making great progress in his recovery from patella tendon surgery. Like that's a pretty big surgery. I don't think many people realize that. Like, it's not ACL, but your patella tendon is very, very important to have. And when that ruptures, there are a little bit of a thing of problems that come forth with that. But obviously his surgery went great. He had a great surgeon who obviously did the operation, and he's just making great progress. So we'll see exactly where he's at come the start of the offseason program, training camp. But I think that the team is going to be smart with how they use these guys a little bit early on. Broncos Country, want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on the vision that Sean Payton has for Malcolm Roach, Brandon Jones, and even Greg Dulcich and Caden Stearns as they make their way back from injuries? Make sure you let us know if you're watching or listening to Locked On Broncos wherever you get your podcast. We'll see you on Monday, though, Broncos Country, because Sayre is going to be running a mock draft Monday simulation. He's going to break down every single pick, why he went the direction he did. You can expect that on Monday's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.